Folks, today we have an extremely special guest. Many of you may already know about Victor, but for those of you who do not, let me give you a real quick, brief introduction. Victor's family came to the U.S. in the 1950s from Puerto Rico, and like many families starting out, times were definitely very hard growing up. His family depended heavily on government assistance while living in one of Chicago's worst neighborhoods. Today, Victor Gonzalez is a sales trainer and motivational speaker with almost 20 years in sales. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering as well as an MBA. He was president of sales and marketing for a $420 million a year company and a vice president of sales in a $3 billion corporation. If you ask Victor what made the difference in his career, he'll tell you that it was his ability to sell, whether it be a product, a concept, or himself. Victor, first, let's start out with explaining to everybody, how did you get into sales to begin with?
It all started when I graduated with my engineering degree. You know, I thought that was the fast way to the money, obviously. If you got a technical degree, you get the money, right? And I remember one day I was working for a company. It was a wireless company, and I put together this bid. And this bid was about, I'm going to say, $5 million worth. And it was a deal that I had worked on for quite a long time, fully designed the system and the whole bit. I was then told by the salesman that we would be doing a presentation for this company. To make a long story short, the presentation went fantastic. I answered all the technical questions. About a month or 2 months later, we found out that we won the deal. Now, when I found out what the salesman made for a commission on the deal, it just made me nauseated because I realized that he made somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 just out of that one deal. And Richard, what do you think I got?
Well, can I guess?
You can guess. Go ahead.
Zero.
I got a very nice lunch from the salesman. And I said, what the heck is this? There's something wrong with this picture. I put in all the work. And obviously the salesman really did a lot of work to get the actual count. But I realized that, the upside of being in sales and being able to combine my ability, my technical ability with my ability to present and sell, I said, I could really, do that job. So, about 6 months afterwards, a sales position opened up, and that's actually how I just launched into sales right away. I mean, I was naive. I didn't know everything about sales, but like everybody else, I started to learn everything I needed to know about sales, and I think within a year and a half, my career just took off from there.
Sales is an amazing and dynamic industry. You mentioned in your book that a salesman has to behave like a torpedo. Can you explain that just a little bit more? It kind of took me back a little bit. A torpedo, huh?
Yeah, I think everybody has that. Everybody asked me the question. It's one of those things where if you want to be successful in sales, one of the first things we all learn in sales is you got to know who your target market is. And when I was working for Honeywell as a summer intern, did you see the movie The Hunt for Red October, Richard?
Absolutely.
Okay, in that movie, if you recall, it's about two submarines, and they're going at each other, and the U.S. submarine uses a special torpedo called a Mach 46. And I worked on the Mach 46 during my summer internship. By the way, that's my only claim to fame as far as the movies. I worked on that torpedo, and the way the torpedo works, Richard, is fascinating. What they do is they launch it either from a ship or a helicopter, and they basically launch it into the water. The torpedo then begins a circular pattern underwater, and then the sonar kicks in and begins to ping. You know that boom you always hear? And what
exactly
is the echo, or the signature, as they say, the outline, think of a silhouette of a submarine. And so what it does, it continues to go into a circular pattern, it continues to ping until it detects something that has the outline of a potential submarine. Once it thinks it has acquired the target, it moves off in that direction. And Richard, as it gets closer, it continues to ping. And as it continues to ping, it continues to further define the object. And as it gets closer, it defines it even more. It defines it even more until it gets close enough that it says, no, it's a school of fish, it's not what I want. Goes back into the attack mode again, into its circular pattern. Begins to ping again, then moves off in another direction. Gets closer to this object, gets closer to this other object, and says, no, it's an underwater rock formation. I mean, it can continue to do this. I mean, it can spot a whale, and you don't want to hit a whale with a torpedo because that's overkill. You would agree, Richard, right? Good.
Definitely. You don't need a torpedo for a whale, for sure.
And what the torpedo has is something, Richard, called artificial intelligence, which we may have heard of. And every time the torpedo goes after something, Richard, it becomes that much smarter. Okay? Every time it goes after an object, it learns how to discern objects better. And for example, when it goes after the first object, it realizes certain characteristics of that first object are not what it wanted. And every time it becomes smarter. And I use this analogy when it comes to salespeople, because when we talk about the mindset for sales and how to be successful in sales, is that a lot of salespeople go after something, first of all, don't know what they're going after. They just want to sell something. And that's one of the biggest problems. You can't sell to everybody. And like the Torpedo, you have to be able to define your target market up front. What is it that I'm looking for? What is the customer outline / profile that I'm going after? And like the Torpedo, once you begin to define your target market, all of a sudden it becomes that much easier for you to sell within that market. And so when I tell people behave like a torpedo, what I'm saying is go after something. And if it's not what you want, it's okay to change your mind. But what happens is you inherently get smarter. And after so many attempts, you'll be able to narrow in and zoom in on that one target, that one submarine of yours that you want. And that's your target market. So be like a submarine. Define your market. Don't worry about being wrong. I think a lot of us have this, notion that if we're wrong, we don't know what we're doing. No. Sales process is an iterative process, which means that you go after something, you do certain things wrong, you got to kind of back up, so that didn't work out, what did I learn from it, and then go after it again like the torpedo. That's what I mean by act like a torpedo in sales.
That's excellent. I've been in sales myself, sales and marketing for about 14 years, and target marketing is definitely something that's come to the forefront of the sales mentality, but I've never actually had anybody explain it quite like that. And identifying the analogy of a torpedo is probably the most perfect scenario I've ever had outlined. That's awesome. Thanks a ton. Why? Let's dive into the actual salespeople. Why do you think people fail in sales, and what would you recommend for them to overcome this?
I think before you even get into sales, or before you even think of the process, starting the process of selling, you know what the first greatest sale you have to make, right? We all know what the greatest sale is. What's the first sale we have to make?
Sure, we have to sell ourselves.
There you go. We have to sell ourselves so that we actually like what we're selling. Because if you don't like what you're selling, you're not going to be able to get into your product. You're not going to be able to understand your product. And I think everything begins with product or service knowledge. You've got to know what you're offering, and you've got to really sell it with that passion, or else people are going to detect it. And people are just like human polygraphs. They can detect whether you understand or don't understand what you're selling. And so I think there is where we begin the sales process. Where people, I think, fail after that is, I think we always talk about the fear of rejection. And I read this stat, I forgot where I read it, but it was a wonderful statistic that I'd like to share with you. And it said that 60% of what you worry about never comes to pass. 20% of what you worry about is in the past, so why worry? 10% of what you worry about, even if it came to pass, wouldn't impact you. And of the remaining 5%, if it came to pass, it would impact you but wouldn't kill you. But if you go back and look at the numbers, 60% of what you worry about never comes to pass. 20% of what you worry about is in the past. That's already 80% of what we worry about never really impacting our lives. And a lot of us fear rejection and get into this whole thing about, I don't want to be rejected, so I don't try. We've all had the experience, or at least I have, Richard. I should just say it like this. I've had the experiences when I was younger. I went out to a nightclub, okay? And I was having one of those nights, Richard, if I can share it with you. It was one of those
Definitely.
nights, no matter what the lady was, who I asked to dance, they all said no, okay? So I made a decision that night. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep asking till somebody says yes, okay? 14, Richard. Finally, the 14th girl said yes, and we finally danced, right? And
Sure.
So I learned that day, that night, I had this whole experiment going that the 14th one finally said yes.